he won't sleep on the floor. Patted here, patted there. Just like a lot of wild people, we didn't know nothing. Didn't like looking no book.
Saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, "Fool me once, shame on you." If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Welcome to Convince Me I'm Wrong. My name is Paul Savage, and I am a rational thinker. But of course, that's always up for debate. As rational thinkers, Convince Me I'm Wrong should be the approach we take to all of our conversations. Changing your mind with new information is not being wishy-washy, it's the definition of open-mindedness. It's okay to unbelieve. It's a sign of personal growth. You can find Convince Me I'm Wrong on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app. You can join the conversation and get more information at www.convincemeimwrong.com. Also on Facebook /Convince Me I'm Wrong. I'm most active on the Facebook page and even invite you to start your own topics there as well as suggest topics. I can also be found on Google Plus and Twitter. Whether you agree with me or not, I'm looking forward to hearing from you, because we all have something to offer. So come on, convince me I'm wrong. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's get started. I'm recording today's episode in my living room, and so there'll be some household noises, but mostly you'll hear my parrot. She's a lorikeet. Her name is Pogo, and she'll be interjecting her commentary from the background. Hopefully you don't find that too distracting. Also, I'm near an airport, so I will be attempting to pause during loud planes. So today's topic is if blue lives mattered to blue lives. And I had a couple of friends ask me, well, what are blue lives? So I thought I would just read you an excerpt from their About page, and you can find this at bluelivesmatter.blue. And here's what they have to say. Blue Lives Matter is a media company made up entirely of active and retired law enforcement officers. In today's evolving society, an increasing number of citizens fail to accept responsibility for their actions and attempt to escape the consequences through outward blame. Due to the nature of the profession, law enforcement personnel are seen as easy targets and are consequently bullied by slander, illegitimate complaints, frivolous lawsuits, and physical threats. The echoes of these negative highlights by the media and political figures have only further damaged community relations, which has greatly increased the inherent threat of the profession. We desire to change these wrongs to law enforcement and once again shed positive light on America's heroes to help boost morale and gain society's much-needed support. The goal of Blue Lives Matter is to honor and recognize the actions of law enforcement to strengthen the public support of an understandably naive society. And I'm going to stop there. I agree that the goal of Blue Lives Matter to gain society's much-needed support is essential. However, I believe that the power to change society's view of police rests mostly in the hands of police. I also think that the words "an understandably naive society" express the us versus them view that officers have of the general public. The Blue Lives Matter movement is law enforcement's response to the Black Lives Matter movement. And though these movements sound similar, they are very different. Keep in mind, Black Lives Matter is about protecting a race, and Blue Lives Matter is about making a job safer. Now, I'll be one of the first people to defend an employee. When people say things like, if you don't like your pay, environment, treatment, whatever, quit and get another job. I think it's a horrible argument. Even though technically it's true, I get the idea. The idea they're trying to put forth is that if it's harder for an employer to employ, they will change the variable to attract applicants. I've also heard the same argument given to police. If you think your job is too dangerous, then quit and go get a less dangerous job. I bring this up first to kind of dismiss it right out of the gate, because we need people who are mentally stable, yet willing to take that risk for the greater good. The job itself should attract the cream of the crop, people who are willing to take that risk for the greater good. It will certainly also attract thrill seekers, power mongers, and other unsavory elements. And I realize that there's an extensive weeding out process to keep the cream and only the cream, but certainly some unsavory folks will fall through the cracks and be hired on as police officers. The job is hard and dangerous, and I've always felt that even if you go into the job with the best of intentions, the job itself will change you. And there will certainly be some officers for whom the job or other life events have changed their mindset and they have become unsavory. For these officers, there is support to heal. There's time off, as one might say, to get right in the head before returning to work. And of course, there's always the option to quit and get a safer job. Unfortunately, the number of these victims, or what I mean to say is, unfortunately, a number of these victims will remain under the radar and continue as officers. What percentage of officers are or have become unsavory? I don't know. What I do know is that I'm jaded. Jaded because I have seen firsthand officers taking the law into their own hands, bending the law in their own lives, and actively involved in what looked to me like criminal behavior. Examples include lying in order to create a reason to search, pocketing of drugs, taking money from a pimp. I've even had officers ask me for information that they have no legal right to ask me, such as asking for my social security number. I can't help but think that if I've seen this much, then bad cops must be very common. Certainly this is anecdotal, but it is certainly food for thought. In any case, reason would tell us that there are and will always be bad cops. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see an officer nearby or in a nearby car when I'm driving, I run down in my head something to the effect of, have I done anything wrong? Am I currently doing anything wrong? And it's also followed by, I wonder if I look suspicious. Now, you might think I'm just being paranoid, and sometimes I think I might be. However, today I had a conversation with an older lady who said that she thinks similar things. I asked if she ever did drugs or frequently speeds or anything like that. And I even asked if she had at any point in her life lived a lifestyle that would warrant some level of paranoia. To all of these she replied that no, she was a good student, a good wife, a good mother, and never did so much as have one drink and drive. The extent of her crimes, according to her, are running a few red lights and stop signs she accidentally ran and never got caught, and a handful of parking violations. We then talked about how intimidating it is to even say hello to an officer that you pass on the sidewalk. We both have had similar experiences of balancing the wanting to say hello to another human and not quite being secure in how they will respond. We've both had more than an acceptable number of officers respond with a, "Why the hell are you looking or talking to me?" look or gesture. I've had officers respond with asking me for an ID, like I'm some kind of criminal already just for saying hello. Now, I understand that when an officer is lying to obtain permission to search or asking for an ID for saying hello, they're most likely following up on a hunch. They most likely feel as if they're doing the right thing and will soon uncover the crime of their suspicion. And I'll cover the unreliability of this kind of behavior as another topic on another day. But for now, it's simply important to understand that as an officer, if you look hard enough, you can gather enough evidence to support your bias. For example, if for some reason you equate full-sleeve tattoos with drugs and search everyone with full-sleeve tattoos, you will likely find enough drugs to not only support your bias, but also convince you that many who didn't have drugs just didn't have them at the time, or were somehow able to hide them from you. The more officers who fall into this belief, the more likely that the law will eventually gain statistical data to support the bias. Here's an example. These are made-up statistics, but I wanted to, give some kind of an example. So let's say 1% of the population has full-sleeve tattoos. But then the statistics might go on to say, but people with full-sleeve tattoos commit 25% of all drug crimes. This would tell you, without a doubt, that tattooed people commit a very disproportionate number of drug crimes. So then the police might then use these statistics to support their searching of tattooed people, even if they had no other evidence than tattoos. Imagine, if you will. Start with a base anxiety of just being approached by an officer. Add the additional, I'm tattooed, so they'll likely harass me. On top of that, the officer who wants to do the right thing but is following a bias, and you have a situation ready to escalate. It follows that the more of these interactions that happen, the more bad decisions on both sides will happen. The more news spreads about these bad decisions, the more anxiety is raised. Bad decisions, anxiety, news, bad decisions, anxiety, news. Eventually we have a situation where even the best, the cream of the crop officers are in danger from the public they serve. If it could be demonstrated that every tattooed person had drugs, then the bias is based in fact and justified. But if that can't be proven, for justice to be fair, the assumption needs to start with innocence, and only real data needs to be used. Otherwise, searching the tattooed on a hunch is harassment. Now, this is one possible path. Let me restate that. This is one possible path to explain how we arrived at a time where the black community is feeling harassed and even slaughtered by the police. While talking to an officer friend of mine, he pointed me to the FBI statistics which clearly show that the black community commit a disproportionate number of murders compared to other races. The statistics also show that the black community commits a disproportionate number of total crimes. This seems compelling to me until I looked past the implications of the data and into the chart itself. Now, the chart goes on to confirm the bias in the chart. The numbers are faulty to begin with. The FBI only collect from those sources who voluntarily submit their statistics. So the numbers are not an all-inclusive look at U.S. crime. The numbers only include convictions. Well, of course, what other numbers could be used? Keep in mind, convictions exclude all those who got away with it and include those who are falsely convicted. If there's any bias in the scrutiny of the black community and in the courts towards blacks, then these numbers can clearly be skewed by enough percentage points to create a statistical bias justifying the bias, and this creates a feedback loop. What else is wrong with the charts? There is evidence to show that if the charts were organized by income, then the statistics would level out across race lines. Maybe not completely, but much more so than they currently are. What if we organized by another metric other than race, such as involvement in a gang, level of education, single-parent families, tattoos? There is evidence to warrant closer examination of some of these other metrics, specifically education. But let's look at another of the biggest flaws in the chart. The chart cannot look at actual crime. Crime where the officer has taken it upon himself to be judge and let someone go. Crime where the criminal or even the crime is ignored, for example, using drugs or driving under the influence or even running a red light and not getting caught. Crime where the police just don't have the time to pursue it. Or crime where there is no conviction. Maybe someone is a good lawyer and gets away with it. Who knows? But unless it's a conviction, the chart doesn't track it. So let me put this all together for you. Police use a chart to hire and apply police hours. Based on this chart, police hours are heavier in poor black neighborhoods. Police are not only more likely to interact with black citizens, but also more likely to catch black citizens for the same types of crimes other races are getting away with. Whether it's drugs, red lights, whatever. So pressure on the community creates excess stress. Excess stress leads to more bad decisions. Bad decisions lead to more crime and escalated interactions like running from a police officer, not listening, maybe even fighting back for an arrest. And this, obviously is going to stress the police. The police are more stressed. Police make more bad decisions. Police report these escalated numbers. The FBI used these numbers to create a chart, and then the police used the chart to hire and apply more police hours. Am I saying the police created the problem? No, I'm not. I'm only pointing out one possible part of one possible path to where we are now. It seems to me that our nation has been very prejudiced towards blacks for most of its history. And I feel that this is the real stressor that ignited the entire situation, but that police's actions have exacerbated the issue. And am I saying that police should let up on communities where there's statistically more likely to be crime? No. So what's all this buildup for? What am I trying to say? If blue lives matter to blue lives, then police need to police the police. Isn't this already happening? Internal affairs. Yeah, but I say it's too little. As an officer, if you care about your own safety, you won't let your fellow officers get away with anything other than exemplary behavior. The police force has so much perceived power that there is very little room for error. So another friend of mine called me out. They're like, doesn't sharing information like I'm sharing here make police less safe? And I think in a small way it does. It contributes to the bad press that contributes to the anxiety. So why would I do this? Let me take a moment to tell you a real-world personal story. As a young, poor, hippie-looking, early 20s person of my youth, I was driving from Chicago to Carbondale to visit a girlfriend. And this, I'm told, is or was a common drug route. It wasn't very late, but it was after dark when an officer pulled me over, and it's important to know that I not only did not have drugs on me, I did not do drugs at the time, and to the best of my knowledge, no drugs had ever been in this car. Let me pause for a second and tell you that this is all from memory, which is fallible. That's a topic for another time. So I don't expect it to be 100% accurate, but I am very confident of the main points. So the officer pulls me over, and I keep my hands on the wheel and only remove them to roll down the window when he asked me to. By the way, just so you know, it was late fall, and so it was cold outside, and the officer asked if I knew why he had pulled me over. I said I didn't, and he went on to tell me that one of my headlights was significantly dimmer than the other, and would go out or need cleaning. And this seemed like an odd reason to pull me over, but if he really was concerned for my safety, then he was doing a good public service. So this is where our interaction took a turn. He didn't ask me for an ID, but rather just looked around my messy car with his flashlight, and then he said, "I think I smell marijuana." To which I jokingly replied, "You must be smoking it because I don't have any." Now, I'm not claiming to be a very smart 20-something, but to this point, I've done nothing wrong, and he is either lying or has no idea what marijuana smells like. It seemed to me at the time that I fit some kind of profile, and he was following up on a hunch. He pulled me from the car, forced me to the ground, and handcuffed me there in the dark, and while I lay between my car and passing traffic, while he proceeded to search my car. After a little while, he went back to his car and got something and came back, and I think he had gone to get some tools. I can't see what he's doing, but I'm terrified. I've got cars whizzing past my head, literally inches from me. And I'm terrified that if I don't get run over by a passing car, that this guy's going to plant some kind of evidence on me to justify his search. After what turned out to be a total of roughly 45 minutes of being handcuffed, cold, wet, lying on the side of the freeway, he, in a very rough, pissed-off manner, unhandcuffed me and told me I was free to go. Not only not apologizing, but his tone was one of, "You got away with it this time." I was cold, dazed, and scared out of my mind. So it took me a while after getting back into my car to realize the extent of the damage. He had not only taken off all the seat covers, but had removed the dash and the center console. I've no tools on me, I'm frightened out of my mind, and my car is literally torn apart. He and his car were gone before I was of presence of mind to even think to try and record any kind of number off his car. I'm sure his version of the story is different. I'm sure he searched an obvious bad-mouthed delinquent who had hidden the drugs so well that he couldn't find them. And I'm sure from his mind that he was doing the right thing in making the world safer. But he would be wrong. He made the world less safe by destroying my trust of the uniform. Now, every time I'm pulled over, the interaction starts from a place of high anxiety. I imagine that if I were less even-tempered or less intellectual, that I might have, by this time, done something to make one of my interactions with police worse. You know, like maybe running from a cop or being aggressive, something along those lines. I'm not sure how often cops do things like this, but they need to stop. Every time an officer oversteps, that officer makes the world less safe. Certainly, these extreme situations are not the normal police response. So why has the world gone from a place where I was told as a child, if you're ever lost or afraid, find a police officer, to a world where children are told, find a public space, like a restaurant or a grocery store? A world where an average citizen is cautious to even say hello to a person in uniform. I think it's because we witness poor behavior from officers that we don't think we could get away with, such as driving while talking on a cell phone, speeding without lights or siren, flashing the lights to go through a red light, not using turn signals, littering. Certainly not all of these are crimes in all places, but they all build on an us versus them base. I've had officer friends tell me that they never get speeding tickets, they just show their badge when they get pulled over. One officer told me that he doesn't like using his seatbelt, and to justify this to himself, he never gives seatbelt tickets. Officers getting special treatment and bending the law only builds on this us versus them image. As I talk to officer friends, I hear them tell me that they are sheepdogs and we are sheep. My understanding is this comes from the writing of Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman. And he says that good people are like sheep, and the shell protecting the sheep from wolves are the sheepdogs. It's a good analogy until taken too far. One officer flat out told me that sheepdogs are a better class of people than the average citizen, born that way. Yes, I've actually heard those words, better and born that way. The problem with this mindset is that officers separating themselves from the foibles of sheep also separating themselves from their follies. In other words, they forget that they're prone to the same self-deluding misperceptions we all are. And my fear after speaking with them is that they are so used to looking for wolves that they see every sheep as a wolf. On the other hand, I want to tell you about an officer I met up in Seattle. Let me call him Fred. The first time we met was on a rooftop, and he was helping to bust a drug dealer. Fred said to me, "See those two guys?" And he pointed to two guys heading to a nook in the building that was really only visible from the rooftop. That one has the drugs, and that one's going to buy from him. And we watched. Sure enough, within moments of him pointing them out, the exchange. At that time, Fred spoke into his radio, and two other officers turned the corner. Fred looked at me, disappointed. All they had to do was look up, and they would have seen me. Fred knew them from the neighborhood. He didn't want to cause distress to the people. He just needed to stop the drugs. I could tell he saw those two guys as people, not sheep, but people who happened to need his intervention. Now, Fred was the kind of guy who would say hi to just about anybody, and he got to know them. Every single time I saw Fred bust someone for something, like jaywalking or whatever, you could see that fatherly disappointment cross his face. I could never imagine Fred searching someone without genuine cause, or planting evidence just to rid the street of somebody he only suspected of trouble. But I am certain that he would pull his weapon if there were no other options, if he had to protect these people he sees every day. Over the next few years, I got to know Fred, and he didn't see himself as a sheepdog, but like the neighborhood father. He was one of us, but in uniform. Yes, police are just people, but image is everything. And in a world where we felt safe talking to an officer, where we felt that they were actually here for our safety, in a world where protect and serve wasn't just a public image lie printed on the side of a police car, people would be more likely to defend an officer's action when it was called into question. And just so you know, it's been demonstrated time and again in court that police are under no obligation to protect. They're under no obligation to investigate, and they are legally allowed to lie. Now, as citizens, we feel powerless to defend our community from bad cops, and I think that's why more people are recording police behavior. But most of us are still afraid to record an officer's actions, to report that bad behavior. I'm actually a little frightened to even release this topic. But it's up to officers to not only take inventory of their own actions, but to create a brotherhood where no infraction is tolerated. Even with the best of intentions and the firmest of convictions, it's never acceptable to stretch the truth, make up evidence in an attempt to teach someone a lesson, or to take a criminal off the street. and it's never acceptable to let a fellow officer get away with any infraction like speeding, littering, what have you. Now, this next point might be an unpopular opinion, but it should be easier for an officer to lose their job than it currently is. When an officer's decisions are called into question, the scales need to fall in favor of the public. Why? Because giving an officer the benefit of the doubt is far too great a risk. One bad officer has the power to destroy many lives over the course of their duties. And an officer who shows less than ideal judgment endangers the lives of the public and other officers. An officer who shows bad judgment needs to be terminated. The risk is too great, and the job is already too dangerous to give bad judgment a second chance. We're not talking about making sandwiches and forgetting the cheese. We're talking about thinking we see a gun when there is no gun. We're talking about firing out of fear. Police need to earn the public's trust. Police need to protect and serve. The police need to police the police. Blue lives need to matter to blue lives. Thank you for listening today and being a part of the conversation. If you would like a chance to convince me I'm wrong, please help by liking me everywhere and especially this show. Join in the conversation, start your own topic, or even suggest topics at convincemeimwrong.com or at Facebook.com/convincemeimwrong. Have a great day. Remember, we are all screwed up in our own sweet little way, so go forth and question, but question compassionately. It's okay to unbelieve. So long.